Welcome back, everybody. Let's get back to the questions. Chris?
Gentlemen, almost 60% of Republican caucus goers identify themselves as evangelicals, so I'd like to spend a few minutes exploring social issues. Governor Kasich, you talk a good deal about your faith. In fact, you say it played a role in your decision to expand Medicaid, and you say that when you meet St. Peter at the pearly gates, he's going to ask what you did for the poor, not what you did to keep government small. Senator Cruz is on the opposite side of this issue from you, so does that mean that you're getting in and he isn't?
No, you know, Chris, here's what happened with Medicaid in my state. We took the growth of Medicaid from over 10% in my second budget to 2.5% without cutting off one person or cutting one benefit, because we innovated the government, and now mom and dad can stay in their own home rather than being forced into a nursing home. And then we decided we could bring $14 billion of our money. I mean, Washington doesn't have any money. It was our money. We brought them back to tend to the mentally ill, because I don't think they ought to live in prison or live under a bridge, to treat the drug addicted so they're not in and out of door policy out of the prisons, and to help the working poor so they don't live in emergency rooms. How's it worked? Well, we have treated the drug addicted in our prisons, and we released them into the community, and our recidivism rate is less than 20%. That's basically bordering on a miracle because of our great prison director. The mentally ill, they've been stepped on for too long in this society, and we are beginning to treat them. In terms of my faith, look, all I say is that when I study Scripture, I know that people who live in the shadows need to have a chance. But I'm not deciding that anybody's got to make these decisions the way that I do on the basis of what I do, but what I will tell you this. The time has come to stop ignoring the mentally ill in this country and begin to treat them and get them on their feet, along, of course, with treating the drug addicted. Because we don't want them in and out. We don't want them in and out of the prisons. Give people a chance. We talked about criminal justice reform. We've enacted it in our state. Look, the conservative message is economic growth, and along with economic growth goes opportunity for everybody in America. Everybody ought to have a chance to be able to rise to their God-given purpose, and that is what we have done in Ohio. We're running surpluses. We're up 400,000 jobs. And guess what? The formula is working. I'd suggest people take a look at it. Thank you.
Gentlemen, we had a case study on religious liberty just this last summer. A county clerk in Kentucky named Kim Davis refused to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples after the Supreme Court ruling, saying that it violated her religious beliefs. Governor Christie, you said that she must follow the law or be moved to another job that would be in keeping with her conscience. But some conservatives say that that violates her religious liberty.
Now, what I said, Chris, was that the law needs to be followed and that someone in that office has to do their job. So if Ms. Davis wanted to step aside and get rid of her ability to be able to do that, there should be someone else in that office who didn't violate their conscience so they could follow the law of the state of Kentucky. I never said that Ms. Davis should either lose her job or that she had to do it. But what I did say was that the person who came in for the license needed to get it. And so if there's someone in that organization, and it turns out there was, who was willing to be able to do that, that's what we should do. But just as importantly, and I agree with what John said, you know, we all have our own individual interpretations of our faith. And here's the problem with what's going on around the world. The radical Islamic jihadists, what they want to do is impose their faith upon each and every one of us. Every one of us. And the reason why this war against them is so important is that very basis of religious liberty. They want everyone in this country to follow their religious beliefs the way they do. They do not want us to exercise religious liberty. That's why, as Commander-in-Chief, I will take on ISIS, not only because it keeps us safe, but because it allows us to absolutely conduct our religious affairs the way we find in our heart and in our souls. As a Catholic, that's what I want to do, and no matter what your faith is, that's what I want you to be able to do.
Thank you, sir. Senator Rubio, during the last debate, you said Governor Christie had changed his position and his mind on gun control, on Common Core, and backing President Obama's nomination of Sotomayor to the Supreme Court. He said you're wrong on the facts and you can't, quote, slime your way to the White House. I assume in the last 2 weeks you've done some fact-checking. Do you want to take anything back?
Yeah, I would encourage people to go on my website, marcorubio.com, and we'll put all the facts up there so people can see it for themselves. But you've just asked a very fundamental question about the role of faith in our country, and I think this is an important question. I think if you do not understand that our Judeo-Christian values are one of the reasons why America is such a special country, you don't understand our history. You see, why are we one of the most generous people in the world? No, the most generous people in the world. Why do Americans contribute millions of dollars to charity? It is not because of the tax write-off. It is because in this nation, we are influenced by Judeo-Christian values that teach us to care for the less fortunate, to reach out to the needy, to love our neighbor. This is what's made our nation so special. And you should hope that our next president is someone that is influenced by their faith. Because if your faith causes you to care for the less fortunate, it is something you want to see in your public figures. And when I'm president, I can tell you this, my faith will not just influence the way I'll govern as president, it will influence the way I live my life. Because in the end, my goal is not simply to live on this earth for 80 years, but to live in eternity with my Creator. And I will always allow my faith to influence everything I do.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Paul, in May on the campaign trail, you said you didn't get into politics to fight about abortion. You said you were more concerned about the national debt. Your answer is to turn abortion back to the states the way it was before Roe v. Wade. Does that mean that if a liberal state, let's say, wants to make abortion legal, that you're okay with that? And what do you say to conservative voters who believe deeply that abortion is murder?
You know, I think abortion is always wrong. I've supported a variety of solutions, both state as well as federal. In fact, just last week I introduced the Life at Conception Act, which would say that the 14th Amendment would defend an individual, even in the womb. But I think on the broader question of religion and politics, you know, I think liberty itself requires a virtuous people. In fact, Washington said that democracy requires a virtuous people. Os Guinness, the theologian, said that liberty requires restraint, but the only restraint consistent with liberty is self-restraint. There's a lot packed into that statement. But the bottom line is we must have virtue, we must have a religious bearing as a nation, but government's not always going to save us, and it's not always going to come from government. But if we don't know right and wrong, I think we have lost our way, I think we come unmoored, and I think without the religious foundation that guides us all, I think we have a great risk of going horribly in the wrong direction.
Sir, just 30 seconds to answer my specific... Just 30 seconds to answer my specific question. Do you favor the idea that abortion should be a states' rights issue, and if a liberal state wants to make it legal, that that's their choice? Yes or no?
No, both a federal and a state approach. I have said that we could leave it to the states, but I've also introduced a federal solution as well. So the federal solution would be the Life at Conception Act, which is an act that would federalize the issue. But I've also said for the most part, these issues would be left back to the states. So there might be an occasion if we did overturn Roe v. Wade nationalized the issue. If you actually had the court reverse Roe v. Wade, it would become a state issue once again. I think it would be better the less abortions we have. So the more states that we had that made abortion illegal, the better as far as trying to save and preserve lives.
Thank you, sir.
Gentlemen, I'd like to ask a few questions about foreign policy broadly. Dr. Carson, many experts believe Russian leader Vladimir Putin has greater ideas, bigger designs for the region beyond Russia's actions inside Ukraine. Fast forward to February 2017, and it is President Carson and Russian ununiformed commandos cross the Estonian border, and they occupy a city in Estonia. Estonia, a member of NATO, essentially invokes Article 5. An attack on one is an attack on all. What do you do?
Well, first of all, recognize that Vladimir Putin is an opportunist, and he's a bully, and we have to face him down. And I would, first of all, face him down in that whole region, the whole Baltic region. I think we need to put in some armored brigades there. We only have one or two. We need much more than that. We need to be doing military exercises in not only Estonia, but Latvia and Lithuania. They're terrified by the saber rattling. I think we ought to put in our missile defense system. I think we ought to give Ukraine offensive weapons. And I think we ought to fight them on the economic basis, because Putin is a one-horse country, oil and energy, and we ought to fight them on that level. We ought to be helping in terms of the technology for fracking, keeping the price low, quite frankly, because that's what's keeping him contained. So, yes, I absolutely would go in if he attacked. I think on Article 5 of NATO, we would definitely protect all of our allies.
Gentlemen, you've all said that the Iran nuclear deal is a bad one. Senator Rubio, you're among the candidates who've said that you would tear it up on day one. But as you know, Iran has already received tens of billions of dollars in this deal and has quickly reestablished ties economically with Europe. The major concessions, in other words, are up front in this deal. So should you win, by the time you take office, the remaining parts of the deal would be the constraints on Iran. So why blow up those constraints on day one, letting Iran off the hook?
Well, let me first describe Iran, because they're not just a normal nation state, and we have no quarrel with the Iranian people. But the Iranian leader, their supreme leader, is a radical Shia cleric who has an apocalyptic vision of the future. He views himself not simply as the leader of Iran, but as the leader of all Muslims, all Shia Muslims on the planet. And they have a desire not simply to conquer the Middle East and to become the dominant power in that region, but ultimately to be able to hold America hostage. That is why they're building right now and developing long-range missiles capable of reaching the United States. And that is why they're going to use those $100 billion to expand their conventional capabilities and to one day buy or build a nuclear weapon. When I am president of the United States, on my first day in office, we are canceling the deal with Iran, and nations will have to make a choice. They can do business with Iran, or they can do business with America, and I am very confident they're going to choose America before they choose the Iranian economy.
Governor Kasich, you've said that Marco Rubio is wrong, that Senator Rubio is wrong with tearing it up on day one.
Look, we don't know what's going to happen in 10 months. And if I were President of the United States right now, I'd be lining up our allies to say that if one crossed T or one dotted I does not occur, they violate the agreement, we slap back on sanctions. We can slap on sanctions alone on day one, but it's not going to be anywhere near as effective. But the President needs to be laying the groundwork right now for the ability to slap those sanctions back on worldwide. And I'll tell you what I'm worried about. I'm worried about money. You read about all the companies now that are doing business, about to do business in Iran. And if we don't get this settled now with other countries in the world about sanctions, then Iran could violate that agreement, and we're the only ones putting the sanctions on. We need to move aggressively now. But I would say this to you, Brett. Number one, if they violate it, we need to move against them. And number two, if we find out they're developing a nuclear weapon and we know how to get to it, we're going to go take it out. That is what we have to do. We cannot let things get farther down the road like we did with North Korea.
But Governor Kasich, you know that the most powerful sanctions are the multilateral ones.
That's right.
And these European countries are already reestablishing these ties.
I know, Brett.
They don't want...
But, Brett, here's the problem. You take a look at Belgium. I talked to a diplomat from Belgium. I said, how's it going? He said, we have the military in the streets right now. We never dreamt we'd ever see it. See, I think there is an opportunity to bring the world together. The Turks are being threatened. We know about the French. We know about the Belgians. We know about the Brits. Everybody is under fire and under attack, and we have to stand together as an alliance. So actually, the opportunity is there, because of the threat to all of these countries, to bring all of us together and say there is something more important than money. It is the future in the world and the future of our children and grandchildren. That's the kind of leadership this country needs, and it has not been in effect during the administration of Barack Obama. And that's only the beginning of the failures that they have committed, not only in the Middle East, but all over the world, including Russia and China.
Governor, thank you. Governor Christie, Libya is the newest base for ISIS. Just today, Defense Secretary Ashton Carter said ISIS is consolidating their footprint there and also setting up training facilities. So if you were president, would you deploy U.S. troops to Libya to take out ISIS there?
Brett, let me tell you, this is another one of those places where Hillary Clinton has so much to answer for and why she is completely unqualified to be commander-in-chief. In a previous Democratic debate, Martha Raddatz 3 times asked Hillary Clinton about the failure in Libya, a policy that she took credit for, and said, what is your measure of responsibility, Madam Secretary, for the failure in Libya? 3 times she refused to answer the question, because she refuses to be held accountable for anything that goes wrong. If it had gone right, believe me, she would have been running around to be able to take credit for it. Here's what I do. This is about the bigger, broader war against ISIS. We need to bring together our European and our Sunni Arab allies, and we need to develop a strategy together to take on ISIS every place that it is around the world, so that together, all of us can take ISIS out, destroy it, and then move on to come back to our country, protect our homeland security, and make sure that the American people are safe. As President of the United States, that is exactly what I will do.
Thank you, Governor.
We're not finished yet. More to come from the presidential debate live from Des Moines, Iowa next. And remember, to see how the campaigns are responding to the debate in real time, go to Google.com or open your Google search app and search Fox News Debate, and please stay with us.